This was the definitive end to Israel Adesanya. I was really expecting to be hating and clowning on Izzy by this point, especially due to the way he was talking leading up to this fight and the big old temper tantrum he had at the press conference. But even as the self-proclaimed biggest Izzy hater, I felt a little sad after. And sure, this wasn't a surprise to me. Again, I ran my model and actually got DDP by submission and did pretty well in the main card. And sure, there's a little sniper's fallacy, so next card I will show the results before the event, just remind me. But anyways, even with me kind of knowing DDP would win, having that confidence and low-key wanting Drakus to shut up Izzy, it's kind of sad how Izzy's career has ended. And yeah, let's establish this right now. Yes, Izzy's career is over. Honestly, he looked good in the majority of this fight, and I know he said in the post-fight interview that this isn't the last time you'll see him, but this is it. There's no fucking way he should be getting another title shot anytime soon, as he's lost 3 of his last 4. But in this video, let's look back at the career of Israel Adesanya, look back at peak Izzy era, where we saw his decline in both performance and likability, how the end of his career will reflect on his career as a whole, and most importantly, look back at the legacy he'll leave behind on the sport. If you haven't already, you should watch this video on the decline of likability of Israel Adesanya, as a lot of his character was shown there and has continued to reveal itself. It's hard to remember the peak of Israel Adesanya just because we've been living out his downfall, but Izzy was arguably the face of the UFC from 2020 to 2022. He looked unstoppable at middleweight with 5 title defenses in a row and was starting to lap the division's contenders. He beat Yoel Romero, knocked out Paulo Costa, beat Vettori a second time, beat Rob a second time, and then capped off his title reign with Jared Cannonier. It was light work for Izzy, but definitely wasn't boding too well with the audience. Despite Izzy being extremely popular and having everyone tune in to watch him fight, the guy was boring during his reign. Out of his 5 title defenses, he only had 1 truly exciting fight and finish in Paulo Costa. Every one of his other title defenses were boring, lulling you to sleep with his low output and leg kicks from distance, which would lead to an unsurprising decision victory. It also didn't help that he also often had to follow up a big performance, like his fight with Romero having to follow up Wei Li versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk, probably the greatest women fight to date. His fight with Vettori had to follow up Moreno choking out Figgy for the belt. His fight with Rob the second time had to follow up Ty KOing Derek Lewis. And then finally his fight with Cannonier followed the legendary beatdown of Max by Volkanovski in their 3rd fight. I mean, imagine seeing all those legendary performances or surprises, and then you have to see this to cap off the night. His likability was waning, which made the eventual loss to Alex Pereira even more devastating to his career. Everyone wants to see a boring champion get toppled by an exciting contender, especially if the boring champion is talking shit, or in this case, kinda talking shit. And well, in a very rare instance, we got exactly that from the literal villain in Izzy's story. It was devastating, embarrassing, considering Izzy lost to the guy 3 times by this point and almost looked like this could have been the end to Israel Adesanya's story. But in a small window during the decline of Izzy's career, he did bring back his likability with arguably the best highlight of his career, finally getting over the hump of Alex Pereira and doing it in an amazing fashion to shut down He Was Boring. And he also had a solid, actually inspiring post-fight interview. But his likability and career would decline even harder than his loss to Alex Pereira in the UFC, starting with the drunken tirade with Drakus in the octagon and letting a lot of N-words fly, and then dug himself an even deeper hole when Drakus was replaced with Sean. If fans didn't like Izzy here, they definitely didn't like Izzy here. He was exposed for a dog thing, let's just say, which was unlimited ammo for Sean and the Izzy haters. Sean, additionally, in the press conference, somehow turned the Australian crowd against Izzy to the point that it looked like it was Sean's home crowd. And what really hammered in the final nail in the coffin for Izzy's true downfall was the embarrassing performance he had against the giant underdog in Sean Strickland. It was brutal. After all the shit talk, after his character was destroyed, so too was he physically destroyed in the octagon, getting dropped and arguably losing every single round. This led to Izzy taking a hiatus, and additionally he got a DUI in there too, so it was not looking good. But there was still hope for Izzy to come back to form. In the beginning of the year, Drakus du Plessis defeats Sean Strickland in a very close match and reignites the rivalry with Izzy. And this is where we would see the true last chance for the stylebender. But in the build-up to this fight, I swear Izzy gave us 0 chances to like him again. He brought back the African beef that you can watch broken down here, but if you have been living under a rock. All of it started with Drake is calling himself the first African champ and the first champion that actually wakes up and breathes African air. He also further explains that all other quote-unquote African champions before him brought the belt back to either America or New Zealand. These statements would really piss off Izzy, which would lead him to that drunken rant and would again be the center of conversation at press conferences. This one in particular. One of the highlights in this press conference starts off with a reporter asking what Izzy thinks about the odds turning him from a slight favorite to a pick'em, and when Izzy mistakenly asks if he's the underdog, Drakus hits him with the "No one said anything about dogs, bro." Already a 10-8 round from Drakus du Plessis. But when things really started to heat up was when someone mentions the true African beef and shit starts hitting the fan. The person who asked the question asks Izzy if he would bring the belt back to Africa, in which Izzy responds yes, he'll not only take it back to Nigeria, but will bring it around the world, which led to a huge opening for a giant Drakus counter as he says, "Are you taking the servants with you when you're going back?" This really struck a chord with Izzy as he lashed out against Drakus, saying he doesn't know his story. He was apparently mean mugging him when Izzy took his shoes off to connect to the earth in a ceremony with fighters to commemorate the native people of Australia, and then explained his story of plight and struggle. And this is where a lot of us, especially me, really lost respect for Israel Adesanya. It's ironic because a couple years ago, I actually respected Izzy for coming out and saying that he actually grew up pretty privileged and well off. I mean, look at this clip.
My family was well off and everything was just taken care of. I didn't really have to worry about anything.
There's been several articles, videos, interviews where Izzy does recognize he's not from the bottom, which is such a breath of fresh air, because the cool thing for celebrities, especially athletes, to do is talk about how they came from the bottom when they really didn't. But cut to now, literally, Izzy is doing a complete 180 and is trying to change his story all of a sudden. And of course, this would lead to the press conference ending with a bang. Izzy, in a later question, would admit that Drakus du Plessis bothered him with the servants quote and just lost it. Completely started bawling, talking about he does this for his family, would try to save face by claiming he would still whoop his ass while crying, and then goes, "I'll kill your dreams, bitch," and ironically leaves momentarily like one. It was extremely telling that Drakus slowly giving Izzy the truth got under his skin, and an emotional Izzy would not result in a winning Izzy. I will admit, he did have his moments in the first round and especially in the third, and it really looked competitive, especially with Izzy striking. And maybe, just maybe, it was starting to look like Izzy could pull out a decision, but ultimately he would get caught by a couple bombs from Drakus, which would lead to the takedown and finish. And I was ready to hate the fuck out of Izzy and really rub it in his face, but he really took the loss way better than I thought. They squashed the beef, hugged, kind of kissed here, and Izzy said Drakus would be an inspiration to a generation of African fighters and laughed it off. And with that, that was the end of the Izzy era, and not just Izzy, but this entire generation of fighters. Volk, Kamaru, and Izzy are all 1-3 in their last 4, and certainly done in terms of their chances to get back to the belt. I've been a casual fan of the UFC since this generation of fighters, but I really started becoming a hardcore fan during the Izzy, Kamaru, Volk era, and so this is the first time I really consciously lived through the rise, peak, and fall of a generation of fighters. And honestly, it's kind of sad seeing the end of this generation, but equally exciting to see what Ilia Topuria, Drakus du Plessis, and I guess technically Bilal Muhammad will do in the future. Even if you hate Izzy, he brought some of the most legendary moments to the UFC. He literally gave us Alex Pereira, fought 2 phenomenal fights with him, and was part of, in my opinion, the greatest rivalry in the UFC and sports in general. He was one part of one of the greatest upsets in UFC history and built Sean into a star, and similarly, he also helped Drakus du Plessis turn into a star. Drakus is great and definitely would have had star power if he just beat Sean, since he does have a very entertaining style, but really his name and popularity will forever be tied to the beef he had with Israel Adesanya. As much as Izzy may be unlikable or a person you want to be rooting against, he still left a lasting impact on the UFC and one that brought excitement. So even if I may not like Izzy, he really did make the state of the UFC better. So anyways, what do you guys think about the end of Israel Adesanya and this era of fighters? It's kind of sad to see this generation of fighters go, but it's also very exciting to see the new one come. So anyways, thank you guys for watching and always supporting. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.